My name is Letícia. My family's lives, especially Sofia and me, have always felt as if they were lived under the intense heat of our mother's expectations. I believe Carmen loved us, but her love was filtered through the prism of social approval measured in money and status. Sofia, the older sister, was always seen as the embodiment of that success, the pride and joy who was supposed to thrive in the risky business of banking. I, on the other hand, chose a different path, studying culture and society, a passion my mother considered vague and unprofitable. But when my mother needed Sofia most, and more specifically money, I was the one who stepped in to solve the problem. What was the truth behind that facade of success? The aroma of roasted chicken and garlic rice usually filled me with a comforting sense of home. But tonight, like many Sunday nights before, it felt thick and suffocating. We were gathered around the polished mahogany table, a weekly ritual meant to signify family unity. Yet the air hummed with unspoken tensions beneath my mother's determinedly cheerful chatter. "Sofia, dear, tell your father about the merger your team is handling," Carmen prompted, her voice bright, her eyes shining with reflected glory. She turned to my father, who was methodically cutting his chicken, his gaze fixed on his plate. "Antonio, you wouldn't believe the responsibility they've given her. Head office is very impressed." Sofia offered a tight smile, the corners of her mouth barely lifting. "It's complex, Mom," she murmured, shifting in her seat. I watched her hand disappear beneath the table, likely finding the worn strap of the inexpensive handbag she always tried to keep out of sight during these dinners, a stark contrast to the designer labels Mom imagined her carrying. Her knuckles were white where she gripped it. Lots of moving parts. "Of course, it's complex. That's why they pay you the big bucks," Carmen declared, beaming. "Such a bright future. Stable, secure." She paused, then her gaze swiveled to me, and the warmth in her eyes instantly cooled, replaced by that familiar look of assessment, of comparison. "Letícia," she began, her tone shifting subtly, becoming heavier, laced with concern that always felt more like criticism. "I saw those books piled up in your room again. Still chasing those cultural things?" The chicken in my mouth turned to sawdust. I swallowed hard, forcing it down. "It's my research, Mom. For my degree." "Research?" she repeated, the word tasting like disappointment on her tongue. "Honey, look at your sister. A real job, a career path. People respect bankers. Who respects someone studying old stories?" Her brow furrowed. "I worry about you. This passion of yours, it doesn't pay the bills. If you find yourself struggling later on, don't come crying to me. I warned you. Life isn't a folktale." Each word was a small, sharp stone hitting my chest. I could feel the familiar heat rising in my cheeks, the sting behind my eyes. I kept my gaze lowered, focusing on the pattern of the tablecloth, tracing the floral embroidery with my eyes. Silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. My father cleared his throat softly, but said nothing, continuing his meal as if encased in a bubble of detachment. His silence wasn't disagreement. It felt more like acquiescence, a quiet surrender to the dominant narrative Mom spun. Sofia avoided my eyes pointedly. I caught a flicker of something in her expression, guilt, pity, before she quickly masked it. Taking a meticulous sip of water, she fiddled with her napkin, folding and unfolding it into precise squares. Her discomfort was a tangible thing, a low hum beneath Mom's relentless monologue about Sofia's imaginary bonuses and phantom business trips to Sao Paulo. "And Sofia's apartment," Mom continued, oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant of the strained undercurrents. "Small, yes, but in such a good district. Close to the bank, naturally. She's thinking of redecorating. Maybe you could help her pick out some sensible furniture, Letícia. Something practical." The implication was clear. Sofia dealt with real-world finances, while I was suited only for the frivolous task of choosing throw pillows. I murmured a non-committal maybe, my voice barely audible. The rest of the meal passed in a similar vein. Mom lauded Sofia's fictional accomplishments, occasionally peppering me with well-intentioned but deeply undermining questions about my hobby. Sofia offered clipped responses, her smiles growing increasingly brittle. My father ate in silence. I felt trapped, pinned down by expectations I couldn't meet and comparisons that chipped away at my resolve. The food remained tasteless, the cheerful facade paper thin, revealing the deep cracks in our family's foundation. Leaving the table felt like escaping a pressure cooker. But the resentment simmered long after the plates were cleared, a bitter aftertaste to a meal meant to nurture. The seeds of doubt about Sophia's supposed success, already planted in my mind, took deeper root as I replayed her nervous fidgeting, her averted gaze, the cheapness of the bag she hid so carefully. Something wasn't right. My small room, rented in a shared house near the university, was both my sanctuary and the epicenter of my struggle. It was cramped, the walls lined with overflowing bookshelves and stacks of papers threatening to avalanche onto the floor. Notes were taped to every available surface, timelines of Brazilian history, sociological theories, fragments of poetry, interviews I transcribed late into the night. The air smelled perpetually of old paper, cheap coffee, and the lingering fatigue of sleepless nights. This was where I wrestled with my chosen path. The financial strain was a constant, dull ache. My meager scholarship barely covered tuition, leaving little for rent, food, or the endless stream of books required for my research into the sociocultural tapestry of Brazil's favelas. To make ends meet, I juggled to strenuous part-time jobs, early mornings waitressing at a bustling cafe downtown, where the smell of burnt coffee clung to my clothes, and late evenings cleaning offices, the scent of disinfectant replacing the coffee, my muscles protesting after hours spent hunched over textbooks. The exhaustion was profound, settling deep into my bones. There were moments, usually staring out my window at the indifferent city lights blinking below, when the weight felt unbearable. Carmen's voice would echo in my mind, struggling later. I warned you, life isn't a folk tale. Was she right? Was I chasing a phantom, sacrificing stability for something intangible, something the world, or at least my corner of it, didn't value? The loneliness of forging this path, without the anchor of family support, felt vast and isolating. My friends, pursuing more conventional careers, offered sympathy, but couldn't fully grasp the consuming nature of my work or the specific pressures I faced at home. But then, I would turn back to my desk, pick up a fragile, yellowed manuscript or a transcript detailing the resilient spirit of a community leader from Rusinha, and the fire would reignite. My research wasn't just academic. It felt vital, urgent. I was documenting stories of resistance, creativity, and survival against incredible odds. These weren't just old stories, as my mother dismissively called them. They were living narratives, shaping the present and future of our country. Finding patterns, understanding the intricate web of social dynamics, giving voice to marginalized experiences. This was where I found my purpose. The determination hardened in my eyes as I highlighted a passage, the words resonating deep within me. This work was more than a potential career. It was my way of carving out an identity separate from the suffocating expectations of my family, a way to prove my worth on my own terms, measured not by salary slips, but by understanding, insight, and contribution. It was the quiet rebellion fought with books and relentless dedication. The pressure from home, the constant comparisons to Sophia's glittering, albeit suspect, success story paradoxically fueled my resolve. If I couldn't earn my mother's approval through conventional means, perhaps I could earn my own self-respect through the rigorous pursuit of truth and meaning in the field I loved. The weariness was real, the doubt persistent, but the passion burned brighter, a steady flame in the quiet solitude of my cluttered room. Each page turned, each paragraph written, was an act of defiance, a step further down a path that felt uniquely, undeniably mine. While I never witnessed it firsthand, the story reached me later, pieced together from hushed tones and awkward silences, confirming the suspicions that had been growing like weeds in my mind. Apparently, Sophia hadn't been networking at a high-level banking conference that one Tuesday or noon Mom had boasted about. Instead, she'd been working, not at a bank, but at Moda Chic, a brightly lit, perpetually busy mid-range clothing store in the city center mall. The details filtered through indirectly, perhaps via a cousin who worked nearby, or maybe Sofia let something slip in a moment of distraction. The scene, as I pictured it based on these fragments, played out with a predictable, yet painful, clarity. Sofia, dressed in the store's standard black uniform, was meticulously folding a stack of brightly colored sweaters, her face set in the practiced, slightly weary smile of someone dealing with demanding customers all day. The air would have been thick with the scent of cheap perfume and the incessant thrum of pop music. Then, the unexpected encounter. Mrs. Almeter, an old neighbor, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper memory for family details, walked into the store. I could imagine Sofia's reaction vividly. The sudden stiffening of her shoulders, the way her smile would falter, replaced by a wave of panic. Her eyes, white and startled, would dart around, looking for an escape. "Sofia, is that you, Mrs. Almeida's voice, loud and carrying, cutting through the store's noise. Sofia would have visibly flinched, turning slowly, forcing the smile back onto her face, though it wouldn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Almeida, what a surprise," she'd stammer, perhaps smoothing down her uniform unconsciously before realizing it gave her away. "I was just looking for a gift." A pause, a nervous swallow. "For a client." Or perhaps she tried another tack, mentioned vaguely exploring opportunities in the retail sector, or helping out a friend. Whatever the excuse, it would have sounded flimsy, desperate. I could picture Mrs. Almeida's skeptical gaze, her polite but unconvinced nod. She wouldn't push, not directly, but the knowledge would be there, filed away. The encounter, however brief, must have left Sofia shaken. I could imagine her relief as Mrs. Almeida finally moved on, leaving her standing amidst the racks of clothes, her heart pounding, her breath catching in her throat. The practiced smile would vanish, replaced by raw anxiety, the fear of exposure, of the carefully constructed edifice of her life crumbling, would be palpable in the trembling of her hands as she resumed folding the sweaters. Hearing about this incident, even secondhand, didn't bring me any satisfaction. Instead, a wave of complicated emotions washed over me. There was a sharp pang of anger at the depth of the deception, at how this lie impacted not just Sofia, but our entire family dynamic, poisoning the well of genuine connection. But alongside the anger, there was a profound sadness, a deep pity for my sister, trapped in a web of her own making, presumably driven by the same maternal pressure I experienced, but choosing concealment over confrontation. Her fear was almost tangible, even in the relayed story. The tension surrounding Sofia's secret wasn't just about a job. It felt like it was about her entire identity, and the possibility of it shattering felt increasingly imminent. The image of her, startled and panicking among the brightly colored clothes, stayed with me, a stark symbol of the hidden fragility beneath her polished veneer. The email arrived on a dreary Tuesday afternoon, illuminating the cramped corner of the university library where I'd practically taken up residence. "Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you the Santos Dumont Research Scholarship." My breath caught. I read it again, then a third time, the words blurring slightly through sudden, happy tears. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant enough to ease the relentless financial pressure, enough to allow me to dedicate more focused time to my dissertation, enough to feel like a tangible validation of the endless hours, the sacrifices, the unwavering belief in my work. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed home, a rare surge of pure, unadulterated joy bubbling inside me. I wanted to share this moment, this proof that my path, however unconventional, had merit. "Mom," I began, my voice tight with excitement, "I have some amazing news." "Letícia, is everything all right?" Her voice held its usual cautious tone when I called unexpectedly. "Everything's wonderful. I got it, Mom. I got the Santos Dumont Scholarship for my research." There was a brief pause. "Oh," she said. Her voice lacked the warmth, the effusive pride she reserved for Sofia's fabricated milestones. "Well, that's nice, dear. Good for you." The words felt obligatory, like polite applause at the end of a performance she hadn't paid attention to. Before I could even register the familiar sting of disappointment, she pivoted, her voice instantly brightening, gaining energy. Speaking of good news, you won't believe what happened with Sofia. Her boss, Mr. Ferrier, the vice president, gave her a huge commendation yesterday in front of the whole department. Said her work on the Thompson account was exemplary. She's practically guaranteed that promotion to senior analyst now. We think it'll come with a significant raise, maybe even a corner office. The air went out of me, my brief moment of elation deflating like a punctured balloon. I leaned my forehead against the cool library window, the glass fogging slightly with my breath. That's great for her, Mom, I managed, my voice flat. Isn't it? We're so proud, Carmen gushed, completely missing, or perhaps choosing to ignore, the sudden absence of joy in my tone. It just shows what hard work and choosing the right path can do. Stability, recognition, that's what matters. Letitia, maybe this little scholarship of yours is a sign you're starting to understand that. A bitter sigh escaped me before I could stifle it. Little scholarship, right path, the comparison was always there, overt or implied. My achievement, real and hard-earned, was instantly minimized, overshadowed by Sofia's latest fictional triumph. It felt like running a marathon only to have someone dismiss it because your sister supposedly won an Olympic gold medal without ever leaving the house. If Sofia had been there, on an extension perhaps, she would have remained silent, I knew, trapped by her own lie, consumed by a guilt she couldn't voice, unable to intervene or offer genuine congratulations lest the whole charade unravel. Her silence, in those moments, felt almost as heavy as Mom's biased praise. I have to get back to studying, Mom, I said quietly, the earlier excitement replaced by a familiar weariness. All right, dear, work hard, like your sister. The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the email confirmation still glowing on the nearby computer screen. The scholarship money was real. The recognition from the academic committee was real. But in the context of my family, it felt diminished, almost insignificant. The feeling of being unseen, unappreciated for who I was and what I valued, settled heavily in my chest. This dismissal didn't weaken my resolve, though, paradoxically, it strengthened it. It sharpened the contrast between the genuine satisfaction I found in my work and the hollowness of the success my family lauded. It fueled a quiet, burning determination to prove, perhaps more to myself than to them, that my path held its own profound worth. But the hurt remained, a persistent ache beneath the surface. The phone call came on a Saturday morning. It was my mother, her voice uncharacteristically tight with panic. Letitia, you need to come home. Now, my heart hammered against my ribs. Mom, is everything all right? He's fine, but his company, they're closing the factory, effective immediately. No warning, just gone. Her voice cracked, and the roof needs urgent repairs. The estimate just came in. It's astronomical. I don't know what we're going to do. The cheerful facade of our family life, already strained, fractured definitively. I took the first bus back, arriving to find a heavy, anxious silence blanketing the house. My father sat slumped in his usual armchair, staring blankly at the television, the picture flickering unnoticed. He looked older, defeated. My mother paced the living room, her hands twisting together, her face pale and drawn. Sofia arrived shortly after me, summoned by a similarly urgent call. She walked in trying to project an aura of calm capability, but her eyes darted nervously around the room, sensing the thick atmosphere of crisis. After a few minutes of strained silence, punctuated only by Mom's occasional shaky sigh, eyes inevitably turned to Sofia. It was unspoken, but the expectation hung heavy in the air. Sofia, the successful banker, the high earner, the one with the stable, bright future, would be the one to navigate this storm. Sofia, Carmen began, her voice trembling slightly, at least with desperate hope. Your father's severance. It won't be much. And this roof. We need to access some funds. Quickly, she looked at Sofia expectantly. waiting for her to outline a plan, to mention savings accounts, lines of credit, the financial wizardry Mom imagined she commanded. Sofia visibly paled. Beads of sweat formed on her upper lip. Despite the cool morning air, she swallowed hard, her gaze flicking from Mom to Dad, then briefly, guiltily, towards me. "Well, Mom," she stammered, her voice thin and unsteady. It's complicated right now." "Complicated? What do you mean, complicated?" Carmen's voice sharpened, impatience replacing the initial fear. "You work at a bank. Surely you know how these things work." "Yes, but my own funds are mostly tied up," Sofia continued, avoiding direct eye contact. She fiddled nervously with the strap of her again inexpensive purse. "Long-term investments, you see, not very liquid. And the banks, they're tightening credit lines everywhere right now. It's the economy." Her explanation grew more convoluted, more desperate, the lies tangling round her like suffocating vines. Panic flickered wildly in her eyes. She looked trapped, cornered. I watched her, silent. The vague suspicions I'd harbored for so long solidified into cold, hard certainty. The stammering, the nonsensical excuses, the sheer terror radiating from her. It was the portrait of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. A strange mix of emotions churned within me. There was a surge of anger at the years of deception, anger at how her lies had contributed to the pressure cooker environment that hurt us all, anger at the pedestal Mom had placed her on. But beneath the anger, there was also a current of pity, pity for her weakness, for the fear that must have driven her to weave such an elaborate fiction rather than face our mother's expectations head-on. Pity for the crushing weight she must have carried, maintaining the facade day after day. Carmen's face hardened. The desperation in her eyes morphed into frustration, then suspicion. "Tied up. Sofia, we're talking about an emergency. Your father lost his job. What kind of investments are more important than family?" Her voice rose, accusation creeping in. "Are you telling me you can't help us after all your talk about bonuses and promotions?" Sofia flinched, tears welling in her eyes. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to form a coherent response. The tension in the room became unbearable, thick enough to choke on. The financial crisis was the catalyst, the external pressure that was finally forcing the internal, hidden cracks in our family structure wide open. Sofia's secret, nurtured for so long in the shadows, was now perilously close to being dragged into the harsh light of reality, and the fallout felt imminent and potentially devastating. Returning to the relative calm of the university felt like surfacing for air after being submerged in the thick, anxious atmosphere at home. The family crisis weighed heavily on me. The image of Sofia's panicked face and my father's defeated posture replaying in my mind. Yet, amidst the worry, the familiar rhythm of research offered a strange kind of solace, a space where I felt competent and purposeful. I was in the Institute's library, deep in the archives, researching community-led cultural preservation projects in Bahia, when I stumbled upon it, tucked away on a bulletin board, almost hidden behind flyers for upcoming lectures, was an announcement for the Andrade Foundation Cultural Impact Grant. My eyes scanned the details, my pulse quickening with each line. It was a prestigious, newly established grant aimed at supporting research projects that not only advanced academic understanding of Brazilian culture, but also demonstrated tangible social impact and community engagement. The funding amount was substantial, more than substantial, enough to potentially alleviate my family's immediate financial distress entirely. But it wasn't just the money. As I read the project requirements focus on marginalized narratives, potential for public workshops, collaboration with community organizations, a jolt of recognition shot through me. It aligned perfectly with the core themes of my dissertation, with the work I was already passionately immersed in. It wasn't just adjacent to my interests. It was my interest, framed as an opportunity, a surge of purpose, clear and potent, cut through the fog of worry. This wasn't just about winning an award or even just about helping my family financially, though that was a powerful motivator. This felt like a convergence, a chance to validate the very essence of the work I'd chosen, The path my mother had so often dismissed. It was an opportunity to demonstrate that studying old stories and cultural things could have real-world value, tangible impact, that it could be a lifeline. My mind immediately began racing, outlining the proposal, connecting my existing research to the grant's specific criteria. The abstract theories and historical accounts I'd been analyzing suddenly took on a new urgency, a practical application I hadn't fully envisioned before. The stories of resilience and cultural affirmation I had been documenting could become the foundation for workshops, for community archives, for something lasting. For the next few weeks, I threw myself into the application process with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The waitressing shifts became a blur, the office cleaning a necessary inconvenience endured on autopilot. Every spare moment was dedicated to refining the proposal, gathering supporting documents, articulating the vision. The library became my second home, the glow of the computer screen illuminating my face late into the night. The motivation was a powerful, complex blend, the deep-seated desire to prove the worth of my passion, the scholarly ambition to secure such a prestigious grant, and the pressing, practical need to help my family weather the storm. It felt like my entire academic journey, all the lonely hours and financial struggles, had been leading to this moment. The pressure was immense, but it was a different kind of pressure than the suffocating weight of family expectation. This was the pressure of possibility, the driving force of hope. Whether I would succeed remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I held a potential solution in my own hands, one born not from fabricated success, but from genuine dedication to the path I had chosen. The situation at home deteriorated rapidly. My father's attempts to find new work proved fruitless in the shrinking job market for men his age with his skill set. The severance pay dwindled. The leaky roof became a network of ominous stains spreading across the living room ceiling after a week of heavy rain. Bills piled up, unspoken but casting long shadows. The air in the house grew thick with desperation. It culminated one evening. I was visiting, ostensibly to drop off some groceries, but really to check in, unable to shake the feeling of impending doom. Carmen was on the phone, her voice strained, likely dealing with another creditor. When she hung up, her face was a mask of barely controlled panic. She turned to Sofia, who was sitting numbly at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of cold tea. "Sofia," Carmen said, her voice dangerously quiet at first. "I just spoke to the bank, the real bank, about a loan consolidation. They mentioned needing recent pay stubs, proof of employment, cries, sharp and accusatory." Bored into Sofia. Funny, they had no record of a Sofia Mendes working at the headquarters downtown, especially not as a senior analyst. Sofia flinched as if struck. The color drained completely from her face. "So tell me, Sofia," Carmen's voice rose, trembling with a mixture of fear and dawning, horrifying realization. "Tell me where you really work. Tell me where all that big money, those commendations, have gone. We are drowning here. Your father is broken, and you sit there talking about tied-up investments." The words became harsher, fueled by betrayal and terror. "What have you been doing all this time? Lying to us, while we pin all our hopes on you?" Under the relentless barrage, Sofia finally broke. It wasn't a gradual crumble. It was the sudden, shattering collapse. A choked sob escaped her, then another, morphing into uncontrollable weeping. Her carefully constructed composure dissolved completely, leaving behind raw, agonizing vulnerability. "I don't work at the bank, Mom," she gasped between sobs, tears streaming down her face. "I never did." The confession hung in the air, stark and devastating. I work at Moda Chic, in the mall, as a sales assistant." Her voice was barely a whisper, thick with shame. "The pay, it's barely enough to cover my own rent and pretend. I wanted you to be proud. I couldn't disappoint you." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. "I'm so sorry," she wept. "So sorry." Silence descended, thick and absolute. My father, who had been standing silently by the doorway, moved slowly towards Sofia and placed a hand, heavy and hesitant, on her trembling shoulder. It was a small gesture, but in the context of his usual passivity, it felt significant, a belated offering of support, perhaps tinged with his own quiet regret. Carmen stood frozen, her face a battleground of emotions: shock, disbelief, profound hurt, and a dawning, unbearable shame. The foundation of her world, her definition of success embodied by her eldest daughter, had just turned to dust. The pride she wore like armor had been stripped away, revealing the fear and insecurity beneath. It was into this emotionally ravaged landscape that my phone buzzed. Almost automatically, I glanced at the screen. An email notification. Subject: Android Foundation grant decision. My fingers felt numb as I opened it. My eyes scanned the formal text. Pleased to inform you. Proposal selected. Outstanding merit. Full funding awarded. Amidst the wreckage of Sofia's confession and my mother's devastation, a quiet certainty settled over me. I took a deep breath, the air still thick with the fallout of the truth. Mom, I said, my voice steady, cutting through the heavy silence. Dad, Sofia, they all looked up, their expressions ranging from stunned grief to terror-struck shame. I got the Android grant, I stated calmly, holding up my phone. The full amount. It's substantial. Enough to fix the roof. Enough to help until Dad finds something. Enough for now. The news landed not with a triumphant crash, but with a quiet, echoing thud in the stunned silence. The shattering of one daughter's carefully constructed lie coincided almost perfectly with the validation of the other's long-dismissed truth. The climax wasn't just Sofia's breaking point. It was a dual revelation, tearing down the old structures and perhaps clearing the ground for something new. A heavy, exhausted silence settled over the living room in the aftermath of the dual revelations. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape stripped bare of pretense. Sofia's quiet sobs had subsided into shuddering breaths, her face buried against our father's shoulder. My mother sat rigidly on the sofa, staring blankly at the wall, the earlier shock and anger replaced by a profound, hollowed-out look. The air felt thin, fragile, as if a single harsh word could shatter the tentative stillness. No one spoke for a long time. There were no accusations left, no defenses to mount. The truth, raw and painful, lay exposed between us. Eventually, Carmen slowly turned her head, her gaze finding mine across the room. There was no triumph in my heart, only a deep, aching empathy for the pain etched on her face, for the shame radiating from Sofia. Carmen looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time without the filter of comparison or preconceived notions. Her eyes held a complex mixture I hadn't seen before, a flicker of admiration, deep wells of remorse, and a dawning, hesitant gratitude. She didn't offer a verbal apology, perhaps the words were too difficult to raw just yet. Instead, she stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen, and returned with a glass of water, placing it gently on the small table beside my chair. You must be thirsty, Letícia, she murmured, her voice low and thick with unused tears. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes in acknowledgement, an offering. Later, tentatively, she asked, this grant, tell me about the research, dear. What is it you study? It was the first time she'd asked with genuine curiosity, not dismissal. Sofia eventually lifted her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, her expression etched with shame. But underneath, there was also a flicker of something else: relief. The terrible burden of her secret, the exhausting effort of maintaining the facade for years, was finally gone. She met my gaze, not with the defensiveness or hidden envy of the past, but with a quiet, painful honesty. Letícia, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't need her apology, not in the way I might have craved validation before. Seeing her stripped bare, seeing the fear that had driven her, I understood. My mother's relentless pressure, born from her own anxieties about security and status, had warped our family dynamic. Sofia, perhaps perceiving herself as less resilient or less willing to defy Mom directly, had chosen the path of deceit, trapping herself in the process. I felt no superiority, only a shared sense of having navigated the same difficult terrain, albeit via different routes. "It's okay, Sophia," I said softly, and I meant it. There was no victory in her downfall, only the shared pain of our family's complicated love and expectations. I didn't offer platitudes or false reassurances. Instead, I simply allowed the silence to hold us, giving everyone space to process the raw emotions, the shattered illusions, the painful truths that had finally surfaced. In that quiet, heavy atmosphere, something shifted. The foundations of our relationships, built for years on a bedrock of comparison, secrets, and unspoken resentments, had crumbled. But in the wreckage, there was a possibility, faint but discernible, of rebuilding on more solid ground. The painful honesty, though devastating in its arrival, had cleared the air. It was the beginning of a long process, the first tentative steps towards understanding, forgiveness, and perhaps, eventually, a more authentic connection. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it felt like we might walk it together, without the weight of lies pressing down on us. A year passed, the seasons turned, bringing with them not just changes in weather, but a slow, steady transformation within the walls of our family home. The frantic energy of crisis had subsided, replaced by a calmer, more grounded rhythm. We gathered again around the mahogany dining table, but the atmosphere was different now. It was a simple Thursday evening meal, black bean stew simmering gently on the stove, its rich, earthy aroma filling the air, a far cry from the forced cheerfulness and underlying tension of those earlier Sunday dinners. There were no boasts, no comparisons, just the comfortable sounds of shared food and easy conversation. I was now Dr. Letícia Mendes, having successfully defended my dissertation a few months prior. The Android grant had not only stabilized my family's finances, allowing Dad time to retrain and find part-time work he genuinely seemed to enjoy, and covering the roof repairs, but it had also propelled my academic career forward. I'd secured a postdoctoral position at the university, researching and teaching, immersed in the work that continued to fuel my passion. There was a quiet confidence about me now, born not from external validation, though the grant had brought that too, but from the internal satisfaction of pursuing my path and seeing its tangible worth. I still helped support my parents, but it was offered freely, gratefully, not extracted under duress or expectation. Sophia sat opposite me, looking more relaxed and at peace than I had seen her in years. After the confession, she had quit the job at Motor Chic, the relief palpable even then. She'd taken some time, explored different options, and eventually enrolled in a vocational course for artisanal baking, something she'd always loved, but never considered a serious pursuit. She wasn't earning a banker's salary, not even close, but her eyes held a genuine sparkle when she talked about perfecting her cheese bread recipe or designing a custom cake. The expensive, ill-fitting mask of the successful executive was gone, replaced by the authentic face of someone finding her own, quieter form of happiness. Our relationship, once strained by secrets and unspoken rivalry, had slowly mended. We talked more now, shared small confidences, offered each other genuine support. The shadow of comparison had lifted, allowing a tentative sisterly bond to finally bloom. The most profound change, perhaps, was in my mother. Carmen still worried. Of course, it was her nature, but her anxieties were no longer solely focused on financial benchmarks and societal approval. She had been deeply shaken by the revelation of Sophia's long deception, forced to confront her own role in creating the environment where such a life felt necessary. She'd started listening more, talking less. She asked about my research with genuine interest, her pride evident when she mentioned my daughter, the doctor, studying our culture to neighbors, a stark contrast to her previous dismissals. She doted on Sophia's baking creations, her praise now focused on the skill and passion involved, not the potential income. She seemed softer, her love less conditional, her definition of success slowly expanding to include happiness and fulfillment alongside stability. My father remained quiet, but his silence felt different now, less like passive acquiescence and more like contentment. He occasionally offered insightful comments on my research findings, or probably sampled Sophia's latest batch of cookies. His quiet approval a steady, grounding presence. As we shared the black bean stew, laughing at one of Dad's dry jokes, a sense of deep, satisfying peace settled over me. It wasn't a perfect ending, not a fairy tale resolution, but something real and earned. We had weathered the storm, faced the painful truths, and emerged into a new dawn, scarred perhaps, but more honest, more connected, more whole. The heavy weight of pretense had lifted, replaced by the lighter, warmer air of authenticity. We were finally learning to see and value each other for who we truly were, not who we were supposed to be. True worth isn't measured by societal expectations or financial success, but found in authenticity, passion, and the courage to live one's own truth, even when it deviates from the expected path. Honesty, though sometimes painful, is the only foundation upon which genuine connection and understanding can be built. How do you find today's story? Leave a comment below. If you like this video, please like and share. Especially don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our interesting and exciting stories.